are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. And thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now by betting on a Super Bowl winner. And then when that pick is picking up wins during the regular season, you're getting bonus bets back every time right now at FanDuel.com/locked on. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you and great to see you back in the 806 after a long road trip to Laramie, Wyoming. Game one now in the books. Not a damn thing goes the way that we want it to. Our bubbles are burst as Texas Tech begins 0-1. I should say maybe not exactly not a damn thing, because there was a first quarter that was mildly enjoyable for a portion of time as the Red Raiders got out to a 17-0 lead. But 35-33 is the way the dust settles in double OT for the Cowboys. We got a lot to digest this week, a lot to digest beginning here today, Chris. But where do we begin as you return back with a team that had a lot of hype and a lot of hope for contending for something serious this year? Still could, but boy, you have really got to gather yourself as you got a team coming to your house that just scored 81. Great to see you again, my man.
Yeah, I'm not going to Wyoming anymore, ever. I felt like I spent a week there on Saturday. Yeah, glad to be back. But yeah, damn. I don't know any other way to say it. It's just kind of a weird. Even if you would have got out of there with a close win, it was just a weird night. Obviously, with the delay and then just kind of just the weird way of how well you started, and then it just kind of poof, gone, you know? I mean, and it didn't, and it was both sides of the ball. Yeah. Cowan, you're rolling on offense, you're moving the ball, you're turning them over on defense, you're stringing them out. They just look like they have no answers. You look faster, and then it just kind of poof, gone, like I said. And like I said, on both sides, you couldn't move the ball. You couldn't get off the field on defense. Then all of a sudden you start – just lots of penalties, mostly on defense that just not smart. Just lack of discipline, I think, is, Joey really harped on that to me going in the locker room at halftime. And then obviously after the game, it was the kind of the same sentiment. It's just because I think he was asked something to the effect of, you had said, this team you felt is better than last year's and all that. But, that's the one thing he said is like, I didn't. He goes, I think we are if we don't, hit people late, hands to the face that takes away an interception, hit a guy with basically 1 foot out of bounds that extends a drive, gives them a free 15, and just stuff like that. That's the fear you have in a game one where you're just not real sure. You think you have a good feel for your team, and then you're just not real sure. Obviously, what you didn't harp on enough, or things like that. But it was just a weird night. But and now, with all this chatter, and we've been right there talking about how we thought this team would be good, and I thought this team would win this game. I think you did too. I wasn't expecting just blowout. We came on the last show that we did, and when I talked about 5 years ago, they beat Missouri. And that's the last time that they opened up a season against a Power 5 team at home, and then they won that game. And last year, obviously, it was on the road, but now it's, hey, I've heard the following, was this the worst loss by any league team in the weekend? And will Texas Tech win another game on the road this season? It just goes from all the talk, and then now you're being talked about for completely different reasons. So you're going to have to earn your way back into some of these conversations that you enjoyed being a part of all off season.
Yeah, if there is one little pitiful, pathetic silver lining, the only thing I got for you is that you have the biggest bounce back opportunity you could ever cook up coming up Saturday in your house. That's the only positive leaving the game is that, man, if you wanted to gain back all credibility in the shortest amount of time, well, then you got the opportunity to go do it. So it's in your hands. Really disappointing to see such a drastic shift from the momentum you had gathered to begin the game, like you were just describing there, to nothing. Duds on both sides of the ball. Fireworks that you're telling the kids, don't go too close yet because we don't know if it's a dud or not. But then 3 hours later, you figure out, no, it was a dud. Never went off again. And I think that dramatic shift, number one, took me aback. But then number two, Chris, to not really see a response from the guys in red and black for a long period of time. I mean, eventually you did, as you were able to regain some momentum later in the second half. And then obviously you have a chance to win the game. And no, it wasn't going to feel great if you walked away from there with an overtime win, but it have felt better than this, right? I'm just sitting there thinking, where is the fire that we saw a year ago that really, to me, was probably the most impressive part of last season, was when you did get hit in the mouth with adversity, or when there was a huge momentum swing, you had a response typically in some phase of the game, whatever it might have been. And I don't really felt like you had that. Now, it could have felt different if, say, you ever were like connecting on a field goal that just kind of kept a little wind in your sails, you know, when it wasn't the best, but it still could have been okay. 3 instead of 0, things like that. Obviously, there are some specific points in which you just continue to deflate, I guess, the balloon, and it's hard to respond after that. But I guess I'm sitting here looking around thinking about all the veteran experience that you have and all the returners from a season ago. And I anticipated maybe a little bit better response whenever your back was against the wall. And we saw it right out of the gates. And Chris, I guess that's what kind of made this team special last year, was how many tight situations you were in, yet you found success within. And unfortunately, another tight situation, game one, but it didn't go the way that it did so many times for you last year. And obviously this being a group of 5 opponent, you being a 2-touchdown favorite, not exactly like it would have felt versus a conference opponent, which, by the way, you didn't have the worst loss in the league. You didn't get smacked around on your home field by Texas State or anything like that. But there's no spit shine in this one, right? I mean, it is what it is. And this is where you come back to town. You look at Joey McGuire, you look at Zach Kitley, you look at Tim DeRuiter, you look at the coaching staff, you look at Tony Bradford, Jalen Hutchings, Tyler Shuck, Taj Brooks, et cetera, Dennis Wilburn. And you say, all right, well, where is now the ability that you should have to rally the troops? Because there is obviously far more football left to be played than has been played, Chris. And you've still got a ton of opportunity, but you got to choose to not lay down and die. I'd like to think that you've got the seasoning and leadership, again, both under the headset and then on the field as well, to avoid laying down and dying. But, man, we got 5 days worth of questions about whether or not that's going to happen coming up. And I get it, because you didn't get the result that you wanted. And in some ways, it was even more disappointing than just a 2-point loss, I think, because there were some kind of what I'm describing there, some intangibles that I was hoping to see very visibly. And at least for 1 week, I don't really felt like we saw them. I
don't know if there was this false sense of security that you got up and it was just kind of very easy, it seemed like. But, you know, I think it's, you know, I heard Andrew Peasley after the game. He said, we knew if we took them into deep water, they'd fold. And he had an unbelievable game. He was tough. I think you beat him up, but he just kept getting up and making plays. And it wasn't pretty at times, but he just kept producing and making plays. And his guys made plays around him, because this is by far the you know, it's not going to be one of the most talented teams that you see, but they just executed well. And I think you were a lot more talented than they were. But again, I think it was their intangibles, because they didn't really do anything to screw themselves up after they, you know, withstood that initial onslaught.
Tough team, man. Tough individuals and a tough team, including the Peasley kid.
Yeah. I mean, I thought Jalen Hutchings had ended him toward the end of the regular season. And you know, I thought that was going to alter overtime. Had he, you know, because I thought this looks just like so many of the hits that I've seen Texas Tech quarterbacks take, and you look up and it's broken collarbone, it's whatever. But I mean, he came back in, and the one play that he makes there in overtime, I think on 4th and 7, when you heat him up and Dadrion Taylor Demerson just comes free, and he's just a half second, and then you just let the tight end go open. He delivered a strike, and that just kind of summed up the game, because there were so many plays you almost made, you know, and like. You know, I talked about last year how big Trey Wolff was, and it's not all Gino Garcia's fault by any means, but, the stat sheet shows he was 1 of 4. He was actually 2 of 5. I don't know where they're getting that because he made a 50-yarder or 54-yarder at one point in the game. He also made the kick to tie it, and right at the end of regulation. He missed the one off the goalpost with like 5 minutes left. He actually makes one at the end of halftime or at the end of the first half that I think the officiating crew puts the ball down and ready to go, and then half of them kind of said, no, you kick it, make it, then he's got to come back and do it again. And he missed that one. And then one of the other misses was in the back of one of his own linemen. But, he's so at 2 of 5, Trey Wolff has missed 4 field goals all last season. And now Gino Garcia's missed 3 of them already in game 1. And that's what allowed you to win a lot of those close games. So that question still remains to me, but.
Well, and then he starts out with a 54, and I'm like, all right, well, I was an idiot for mentioning Trey Wolff over the offseason. Here we go, 54-yarder, no big deal. And tip of the cap to the home cooking clock keeper. 3 seconds there at the end of the half is what it should have been. Somehow they got confused. I guess I'd have just greasy fingers from a corn dog or something, probably slipped on the button to stop the clock. And then, I have no clue why the officials, other than just the fact they're bumbling buffoons, would stop it there, but you kind of knew it was coming. Like, no, they're not just going to let us get one off. Seems like that would happen in any game of football anywhere on earth. The officials would screw that up. It's like, I know that officiating basketball consistently end-to-end is more difficult than landing on the moon because we've seen one, we've never seen the other. And I maybe could apply it to the same thing here, talking about the context of that situation. I couldn't get away from that, Chris, and it's not one player, one man, obviously, that led to the result. But I could not get away from all the conversations we had over the offseason about don't sleep on replacing Trey Wolff and how big he was last year in making your season palatable versus not a success. Because remember, you were 7 and 5, right? That is a thin margin between, hey, we enjoyed this versus we didn't enjoy this. And a lot of that was based on the foot singularly of Trey Wolff. So obviously that was apparent there in game 1. I want to pivot with you for just a moment and talk about another conversation we had throughout the offseason that unfortunately we didn't see the results we wanted to see in game 1, and that is trying to change or flip the script on the road. Having success in Lubbock is one thing you needed to restore because you didn't do that either the previous decade. You kind of have made some headway toward restoring that a season ago, but obviously the road woes were still there for you. Maybe lifted a degree as you got towards the end of the year. Got a win in Ames, Iowa. Neutral site win in a bowl game, but still nonetheless away from Jones Stadium. It was a topic of conversation for you and I over and over this offseason. How do you find success on the road? How do you sustain success on the road? Well, first time out, you didn't do that. But how did you feel about the context of Tech in a road game, how that impacted them? Anything the same, anything different from what you experienced a season ago? First, today's episode brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company, changing the non-alcoholic beer game for the good of all mankind. For starters, these non-alcoholic beers actually taste good, full flavor, well-crafted, and I'm talking not just great taste, but award-winning great taste, beating out full-strength beers and global competition. So head on over to athleticbrewing.com where you're going to find over 50 styles of craft, non-alcoholic beer. And of course, Athletic Brewing Company brews are fit for all times, anytime, anywhere, and an added bonus, no hangover. Change the game by finding Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic beer at a store near you or online at athleticbrewing.com. And right now, first-time customers can get 15% off your first online order by using the code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for 15% off your first online order. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company at athleticbrewing.com. Fit for all times. How did you feel about the context of Tech in a road game, how that impacted them? Anything the same, anything different from what you experienced a season ago?
Yeah, what's ironic is that I think a couple of your issues last year on the road were slow starts.
Yes.
I mean, you're down 20-0 at NC State. I think you got down a bit at Kansas State. I think you kind of hung in there with TCU and with Oklahoma State. But, so if I would have said, hey, how do you be better on the road? Well, fast starts is one of those keys. You can kind of just play well and carry it through. And yet I just, so you check the box on a fast start. I mean, 17-0, and you feel like you're in good shape. But, I think good to great teams are able to squeeze and like end it right there and like kind of lean on them and like, be done with them. And you just weren't, you weren't ready to do that. And so I think you're still in the process of taking this next step. And I just wonder, Joey has talked a lot about, he's talked a lot, and I think all of his words are being used against him now. People are frustrated, and that's what happens when you start getting results and winning and losing, and people point to, 60 minutes of us and all these different things that he has said, and now it's being pointed back at him. But he has said repeatedly, this is a process, but he's also said, like, why wait? Like, we're ready to go right now. Let's push through. Let's try to win the Big 12 like right now. Let's not like wait for us to get all of our players in here and like grow them up and all that. Like, there's no need to wait. I'm an impatient person. I mean, he's kind of talked about some of those things, but I think you're a good team. I really do. I just don't know that I think it's fair to say, I don't know if you're great anywhere. And what I mean by that is it's like the lack of a superstar, like a dude, like a guy that can like win you a game here or, put a game away in that sense. And I don't know if you necessarily have that yet. And I think that's going to be a theme until it's not, just like trying to win on the road. And I think, when you go back and look, I think that's what winning on the road is about. Like you have somebody that just steps up and like, gets you out of a funk. So I don't know. Winning on the road, though, because Joey's now, it's going to be attached to him. He's 1-5 on the road as the head coach in true road games, here. Yep. And so that's also going to be a thing until it's not. He understands that. He's well aware, and he talked about that, before this thing.
Well, I'm kind of, when you're talking about an individual taking over or going and winning you the game, I'm thinking about one of the more bizarre sequences within the game on Saturday night when you just went QB sledgehammer, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 times in a row, all of a sudden. And I was just wondering about your take on that. That confused me because I kind of thought you went away from the ground game, like you sort of gave up on it and you're like, I'm going to do something else. And then all of a sudden it was like, here's my quarterback all these times in a row, almost at the heights of frustration. I felt like it was me at the Madden controller, just like, all right, screw it. I'm running this play over and over and over and over and over and over. And the sequence, like the ebb and flow of the offense, that seemed disjointed, that side of the ball, I guess, or some of the offensive ebb and flow. And by the way, I haven't said it, but credit Wyoming. I'm sorry it took me 19 minutes into the program to get to that. Defense is seasoned, defense is stout, and a tough team. So there are plenty of self-inflicted things for Texas Tech, but I want to credit the Cowboys as well. But yeah, the offensive ebb and flow, man, just after those first 2 possessions just really seemed disjointed throughout the night. Kind of bizarre.
Yeah, their defensive line is good. It's not going to be the best defensive line that you see all year, but that was the strength of their team. We knew this. They were all returners. They play hard. They're well coached. They were taught, you could tell they get their hands up. They batted some passes down. I thought you maybe had to keep your tight ends a bit more than you thought you were going to, just to help block, which I don't know if that's a direct reflection on your tackle play or if it's just what they felt like they needed to do. As far as the QB run game stuff, I know that Tyler, whoever is playing quarterback, it would be Barron, or last year was Donovan Smith too. Zach gives them a lot of freedom. This is the way he learned it under Cliff. And so I don't know if those are called, at the end. I don't know if he's checking into that, if he's, because it's always, hey, here's the play. And then he really gives these guys free reign because that's the way that I think that you feel like, it's best run whenever, you see things or they check into something or whatever. And that's why it's important to study if you're one of these QBs and all those things, so you can kind of get a feel for that. But I guess my take was, when I saw, because it was just like the end of the Iowa State game is what it was last year, and the QB power. And I thought there's a couple things. One, because I'll tell you who I was standing next to, and I said the same thing to him. And I said, what do you make of the QB run here, like over and over again? And it was Davis Webb, who is coaching Russell Wilson for the Broncos right now. He said to me, and I was like, it's a valid point. He said he's putting the game in Tyler's hands. He's telling him, go win it. And because it was QB run, and then he throws the shot in the second overtime to Bradley. It was a great pass, dropped it right in the bucket, and then obviously it was Taj that scored the first touchdown in overtime. But I knew that you're trying to stay away from just as much QB run, but it also was this a credit to Wyoming? Like, we can't run it traditionally. Let's try to do something a bit different. And then it kind of you started getting 4 to 8 yards a pop there. It's like, okay, let's keep going. And then does that open up something else? So I don't know the thought. I think, but it was definitely interesting because you hadn't shown it all game long, and then I also think it's like, okay, you not wanting to turn the ball over too. I don't know, but yeah, it was just kind of the weirdness of the night. I think that just kind of was another layer to it.
No doubt, man. And trying to get that ground game back on track, I know is going to be a priority heading into Oregon. I'd be having a fullback casting call if I could all week long. Dank Hank Teeter, I don't know who we need back there, but the one back stand beside the quarterback shotgun set into a ground game just always seems like a tough road to hoe. It certainly was Saturday night, but again, credit to the Cowboys. All right, let's wrap it up. Coming up next with a couple of things we want to get into. Let's get back to something that obviously impacts the ground game along with everything else. Let's talk trench work. Both sides of the line of scrimmage, offensive line, defensive line, and obviously there were some impactful injuries that took place within the game. We'll get to the lingering impact on them this week and beyond up ahead on Locked On Texas Tech. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, and football season is breathing down our necks, and I kind of like it. And FanDuel is giving you a chance to be a winner all season long. Right now, today, head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon, and when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets back every time they're winning throughout the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl today at FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you're going to get bonus bets for every dub they pick up. Download the app through the App Store. Safe, secure, easy to use, or head to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And then you can throw those bonus bets at over-unders, player props, spreads, and much, much more. And, of course, when you're a winner with FanDuel, you're getting paid instantly. Just one of many reasons why FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets right now with America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network with Chris. I'm Casey coming to you from, Cope Central, basically here today in the great state. We're getting through it together as it's only week 1, folks. It is only week 1. And Oregon is coming to town. We'll turn our attention to the Ducks a couple days from now. As certainly they got a lot of folks' attention across the nation with their week 1 effort. But before we're out of here, Chris, want to get to some injuries that obviously impacted the game Saturday, but curious as to what the impact might be as we move forward to other Saturdays here in just a moment. But we can't leave the show without specifically spending some time paying attention to those guys in the trenches, because that was as discussed as anything through the offseason, kind of for different reasons. Defensive front, felt really excited about because of what you had returning, even though you had to replace Tyree Wilson. Was excited about the chance to see Linton and Cole pick up some slack there. Offensive line we talked about because you were not where you wanted to be a season ago, and there was a lot of conversation about, after some shuffling, some progress that had been seen. Take it either direction you want to, Chris, but as far as trench work was concerned, what did you make of the initial outing Saturday against, as we've already mentioned, some tough competition on the other side of the line of scrimmage?
Yeah, I think your offensive line is still, again, it's probably not where you want it to be. I think that has probably a lot to do with Wyoming, but I think your just inability, whether that's on Taj or whether that's like not checking into the right runs or out of the wrong ones or whatever. I just thought your inability to run the ball, and I did think you had to keep your tight ends a bit more than I was expecting to kind of help protect a bit. So I don't know. It's because that's the part, I guess one of the big takeaways from the game was just, I felt like, your long run, Cowan, was 12 yards, and that was by Tyler Shuck. I mean, that's just got to be a better part of what you want to do is to be able to run it. And so I think, and you got, Tyler got sacked 3 times, whether he held on to it too long or whatever. So I think we'll just kind of say that's still very much a work in progress. And then defensive line wise, I mean, I think there was a lot of almost plays that you made. You almost get home, but Peasley stepped up. DQ James kind of squirted out of some different things on from a running back standpoint that you kind of have him bottled up front. I thought, so I think both groups were just okay. I guess without knowing exactly what everybody's assignment is and all those things, I just say that, as far as impacting the game, it was just kind of okay. That's where Joey would tell you that they've got to be better if they really want to go to where they want to go as a program, not just this season or this Saturday, but you got to win up front. And I don't know if you can say that you did that at all Saturday.
It's kind of a bizarre feeling watching specifically, say, the offensive line, because I think more often than not, Tyler Shuck had a clean passing pocket. Again, the ground game was kind of a different conversation, but there were some times where I feel like Shuck was flinching, or he was like escaping a clean pocket to run into a sack. Or
I don't disagree. However, I would say that sitting down there's not a lot of people open. And that also was a problem. I knew Wyoming would be good on defense, and they switched up a few things because I think they did tweak a bit what they do. They kind of played some of that double clouds type stuff, almost inviting, Shuck to run. Like you want to take your 5 yards, go for it. We're going to pop you though when you do. And he didn't. He took it some. He didn't take it all. And then you finally started to figure some things out late in the game with Jerron Bradley and Dre McCray, but when it wasn't going well, this is what I saw.
Either way, a long way to go, obviously, in those departments, among many, many others. And unfortunately, the road made even more difficult because of some injury impact, Chris, beginning with our guy, Jacob Rodriguez, who was affected, obviously, and did not return to the game. And, man, if he is somebody that has lingering impact as far as that injury is concerned, that position, boy, that sure gets really, really scary in a hurry.
It's one of the very few positions on your team where you just don't have a lot of experience there to begin with. Jacob is not experienced either. Obviously, he won the starting job, but there's just not a lot of proven experience there at all, much less, obviously, behind him. And so you're playing Trent Lowe, you're playing Tyreek Matthews, you're playing, Ty Khan, I don't know if he got in there, Ben Roberts, and just guys that really haven't done it yet. I thought Josiah Pierre played well, but I'm afraid that you could get some bad news on Jacob Rodriguez. Fingers crossed. I hope that it's not, but I think that he was on a boot, and that would be a big time blow if he's out at any point, because he's a really good player, and I think that's also, it's not why you lost, but it's also worth noting that when he went out of the game, things changed a bit. So I don't know if that's a direct correlation or not. But,
well, and I'm glad you mentioned Pierre, because we hadn't had a whole lot of opportunity to compliment anyone when you lose on the road like that. But I thought Pierre gave a great effort, man. He led you in tackles, which he's probably going to do a lot this season. But he was flashing all over the screen, sideline to sideline. I thought he gave a great effort. But you're going to need that and then a hell of a lot more as you set your sights now on a top 15, maybe approaching top 10 Oregon Duck squad coming to town. We've got a long way to go here this week as we process what we saw on Saturday and turn our attention to the home opener, as I've already mentioned, with every bit of opportunity you could ever ask for as far as a bounce back from a disappointing week one. We'll be here with you throughout the week to chop it up. Chris, looking forward to it, man. Glad you made it back to the LBK, and appreciate the time as always. We'll do it again tomorrow.
Guns up, keep hope alive. We need it. And fun week this weekend for sure. And all, hey, man, just keep grinding away. It's one game, a whole lot left to go. Still think you have a good team, and we'll keep rolling.
And I'm dialing up every K-State group of 5 non-conference matchup they've lost in the last 10 years to figure out how they rebounded to win a conference title after that. Hopefully you are too. Keep hope alive. I'm doubling down on it. Usually I just leave it up to Chris, but this is the type of Monday I think I need to say it as well. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you miss nothing, and we'll see you for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.